Hey guys, it's Roderick. I'm here for the review of Mayfair Witches, Season 1, Episode 2, The Dark Hour. If you're new to this channel, welcome. This is where we review some of the hottest shows and films with an eye towards screenwriting, acting, and filmmaking, and we just have a good old kiki. So let's get into it. Okay, so we're on Episode 2. I know some of y'all are feeling some sort of way about the show. I'll kind of deal with that at the end, kind of like, whatever. But so now we have the pilot, right? So we discussed last week how the pilot sets up who the characters are, what the world is, who our protagonists is, who our antagonists is. So in the second episode of any good series, we kind of expand that world, right? We're supposed to see a raising of the stakes. We're supposed to find out more of who these characters are, kind of more to what their objectives are, and also some of their flaws, right? So let's get into it. I'm going to review the episode, and then we're going to kind of like drill down real quickly, kind of like thoughts, problems, those type of things, okay? So the episode starts off, and we get the flashback. Y'all already know what I already think about flashbacks. 9 times out of 10 bad, sometimes good, right? So this flashback, not so much, right? Because all we get is a flashback of the 1600s in Scotland of these two, middle-aged, not middle-aged, but kind of like medieval times women, two little girls going off picking some herbs because this guy's really hurt. So like, okay, maybe these are witches, whatever. And they're go picking stuff. And then the one sister's quizzing the other sister on what this is. And then all of a sudden we see this man in the back by the tree. And I'm like, oh my God, is that Lasher? So has Lasher been in the family? Da-da-da-da-da. Girl, no. It's like this sad little hand job scene with some crows who are speaking her name. And I was like, what is that supposed to be, right? But I was like, whatever. Maybe we'll tie this up at the end and we'll see what this really is, okay? So now we get a flashback and we get to Rowan, Rowan is just going through it, okay? So she's sad, she's crying, she's drinking, hugging the urn, all this stuff. And in the meantime, she's being followed, right? So we know that she's being followed by the Talamascan guy, Cripe Green, whatever, because he's taking an interest. And he's called, right? And he finds out that the mother is dead, or he deduces that the mother is dead. So he's trying to talk to her, and then he goes and he talks to the other Talamascan guy. I was like, I think I need to tell her she ain't got nobody, blah, 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 boop. So anyway, the Talamascan guy's like, mind your business, stay in your lane. Our job is to protect her. You don't need to be telling her anything, right? Now, we go to New Orleans, and Carmen Sandiego, the son Carmen Sandiego doctor, who's all just out of his lane, is not drugging up Deirdre, right? So he's like, I'm gonna get you out of here, whatever, pretending to give her a shot, right? In the interim, Deirdre and Lasher are in this kind of dark place, talking, and he's like, you can wake up now, because now that she's not being drugged, she can really come to herself. So by the time the doctor leaves, he's like, I can get you an attorney. She's like, I can't really stay here that much longer, it's gonna take a while, whatever. He leaves, pretends to give him the shot, and Deirdre's pretending she's really in a coma, which gave me old school tease of remember the old soap operas, whatever, when a person would really be paralyzed, but they weren't really paralyzed. They had to pretend like they were paralyzed or whatever. It was kind of giving me that little bit of tease, but whatever. So Deirdre's awake, whatever. So now we go back to Rowan. She goes and looks at her schedule. She's not on the schedule. She sees Dr. Keck, who I thought had died for some reason, but I guess he just had an aneurysm and he just fell out. I mean, didn't y'all think he did? Didn't y'all think he died? I mean, you knew the other guy died, but whatever. So anywho, we go on down and we see Dr. Keck. She's like, I'm not on the schedule. He's like, look, you need some time off. Your patients are on anesthesia 1.7 times more. That's a little bit long for you. She's like, but that's still better than everything on the team. He's like, look, you're off your game. She's like, what can I do to get back on the schedule? So he's like, go 2 floors down and go see the psych person. If they clear you, you can come on back. So Rowan goes to see the psych person, and the psych lady is just like, really like, okay, how you doing? You know, your mother's, just passed. And she's like, and I haven't skipped anything. And Rowan's just like really, trying to talk and really trying to rush through this process, right? Which kind of sees what we are trying to do. Like, she's trying to rush through this grieving process with her mother. And the psychiatrist was like, well, okay, then let's talk about it. And then Rowan's like fumbling or whatever, like doing her hands, which I don't know if you've ever watched. Go back and watch, if you have HBO Max, watch the Wonder Woman episode with the Jinx, where the woman starts fumbling with her hands, and then like she starts having all this crazy stuff happening. It, again, totally gave me a call back to that Wonder Woman episode with Linda Carter, because she's fumbling with her hands, but then she's like tries not to fumble with her hands. Needless to say, she causes old girl to start having a nosebleed and a migraine. And so the psychiatrist starts dripping blood or whatever. Rowan runs out because she can't have one dead body and two dead people falling out all over her, right? So then she rushes out to the car. She goes to the car, right? And she's getting ready, and then she sees crows, and then we see her like project herself in the crows, and these crows start like dropping down on her car. Crippen is over here just doing his good old shadowy, follow back. And from his point of view and his vantage point, as we see, there ain't no crows. We see her scooping up nothing but air because no crows have fell. And I was like, oh my God, girl, you like are really doing like, were the crows real? Were the crows not real? Or are they just real to her, right? So she's like scooping up crows, putting it in her jacket, and then she's like leaving, okay? Mind you, she's been having the feeling that someone's been stalking her anyway, right? So she's driving off with the dead crows in the car. Cripen's like, girl, whatever. Let me just go ahead and follow you, right? So then we go back to New Orleans, okay? Deirdre, she goes in her room, and she's like all out, and she's free, and whatever. So then finally, she's like playing, and she sees her little snow globe from back in the day, and her and Lasher used to do yum, yum, yum. And then she throws the thing up against the wall because she's pissed because she wants to get out of here because she wants to see her daughter. Lasher's like, don't worry about it. The daughter's going to come to you because your daughter's alive, right? So don't worry about that. I'm going to get our daughter, bop, bop, boop, okay? So then what does a new person do after they've been comatose or whatever? They get their back blown out. So Lasher and Deirdre start hunching in the bed, but it really is like, okay, is it Deirdre? Is it Lasher? Is it imaginary? Whatever. In the interim of that happening, so Rowan goes back to the beach. She done laid out on the beach because she's all upset. Done buried the fake imaginary birds. Crippen's like, okay, I'm going to come in and intercede and try to talk to her, right? So he goes, tries to talk to her. She's like, don't come near me. He has his little gloves on because he's like, I guess would be clairvoyant, but it's more like an empathic type of thing, right? It's kind of like a magical empath, if you want to be kind of technical about it, right? So he goes and touches her, even with his gloves, and he falls the fuck out, right? She does CPR. The ambulance comes, puts him in. She snatches his phone. She sees pictures of Carlotta, who's her adoptive mom, with a young picture of Deirdre, and it says cousins. So at least now we know that Carlotta and Deirdre were cousins, and that's why Carlotta was calling Carlotta Aunt Carlotta, right? So that's at least one mystery solved, right? Without any heavy exposition. In the interim, prior to him going there, Crispin has snuck on the boat, and he's seeing flashes, and he sees Deirdre crying. He touches her purse and sees that Limley guy dying, which was the impetus for him trying to talk to her on the beach. So I kind of left that part out of order. Anywho, that's why he's like, I gotta talk to her, because he done empathically found out that she's just going through it, crying and whatever. Anyway, after we get that, Crispin wakes up in the ambulance, was like, fuck this, I gotta get the fuck up out of here, right? So then she follows him, and then when the ambulance arrives at the hospital, he's gone, right? So she's looking at the picture. So then finally she decides that she's gonna go to New Orleans because she sees that the picture is taken in New Orleans. Out on the plane, as she's traveling to New Orleans, she's having this whole situation where as Deirdre and Lasher are hunching, right? She's feeling it too. And did anybody else expect somebody in the airplane to be like, I'll have what she's having? Tell me, some of y'all had to be thinking that too. Some of y'all had to be thinking that somebody's going to be like, I'll have what she's having. Like that old herbal essence commercial or whatever. Anyway, so We go back there. Now that DJ's done getting hunched or whatever, the old maid is like, girl, I heard sounds coming in my room. It sounded like two raccoons scratching in the walls. I almost died. So here comes Aunt Carlotta, giving slave master plantation old lady realness, fussing about her sweater. Why doesn't Deidre have her sweater? Bob, bob, bob. So then she goes to give Deidre her sweater. Aunt Carlotta leaves, and Deidre's like, she's about to hunch out, and then old maid finds her. She's like, girl, and like there's, gets to this moment, and she's like, girl, now I done been locked up in here. And she's like, go ahead, girl, do you. Because once again, black person staying out of white people's business. First example, you want a fool la? Fool la. That's your aunt and your business, right? I ain't tying you up. I ain't doing nothing. So you go ahead and fool la. So where does Deidre go? But Deidre goes to see her uncle Cortland, played by Harry Hamlin, right? He's like, girl, what? He's like, you're up? So clearly Courtney and Carlotta don't talk because he ain't came to visit her. He ain't brought her no soup. He ain't got her a new dressing gown. He's like, oh, you walking? And she's like, yep, not only am I walking, my daughter's alive and she's coming here and whatever. And then the first thing he said was like, girl, I'm kind of happy for you with this whole Lazarus thing you got going on, but where is he at? Right? So clearly, Cortland knows about Lasher, knows that he's kind of hesitant about having Lasher around or whatever. So she's like, oh, girl, Deidre's like, he's gone, bop, bop, boop, boop, okay? So he's like, well, since you're here, you want some drink? And she's like, nah, ain't nothing going to be fogging up my mind today. I ain't drinking. I already got my back blown out. So now he's like, okay, let me get you a dress, So then he goes, she comes back downstairs. She's all dressed up. And then she's like, I remember you used to draw me dresses all the time. And then Aunt Carlotta used to take them and rip them or whatever. And I was like, oh, girl, like this is like giving me Annie tease or whatever. So she's all dressed in her little, blue dress. So they go into the room and she decides, so she performs this kind of like, I guess you'll call it astral projection or astral inhabitation. Once again, the merging of kind of psionic and magical elements for comic book nerds out there. So she does that where she kind of inhabits Asher's body and she gets to see where Rowan is, right? So he's in the hotel room, she's in the hotel room, and then she sees Rowan and sees what hotel she's in, sees what room she's in from the room key. And then Deidre wakes up and she's like, oop, she's already here. Now, Rowan has arrived in New Orleans. After she reads the desk attendant for filth for calling her miss and not calling her doctor, right? And she kept looking back at this guy, right? And I was like, is she gonna try to get in a really quick fuck before she goes in looking for her mom? I couldn't figure out what that was about, right? Because she kept turning around, looking at this guy, and I'm like, girl, if you in New Orleans, you on vacation, go ahead and fuck him. That was just a very odd moment. Tell me later, let me know if you all thought too that she was just gonna, get a little yum 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 in before she went looking for her mom. Anyway, she goes up, she's showering, ergo Lasher seeing her. Meanwhile, Aunt Carlotta is at the hotel because that's where her, racist New Orleans women's club is getting on or whatever, and they walk right past each other. Because of course, Aunt Carlotta wouldn't know Rowan, but if they are witches, wouldn't it be witchy, spidey sensey or something like that? But once again, just me, right? So, Aunt Carlotta's upstairs, Rowan's upstairs, Deidre decides to go and see her, right? So Deidre leaves to go see Rowan. Kreisman calls and was like, hey, I'm awake. How you doing? Why do you have all these pictures of me? Look, I'm from an organization called the Talamasca. Our job is to watch people like you. I can fill in all the gaps. Where you at? I'm at the Pontchartrain Hotel, room 10, whatever. She's like, fine, come down and meet me in the lobby. We'll have a kiki and talk. I'll fill in all the gaps. Don't worry, whatever, right? So she's getting ready to go downstairs. Mind you, Deidre's getting ready to go upstairs to meet her, right? On Deidre's ways in, who does Deidre run into but Aunt Carlotta, right? And she's like, girl, what are you doing up? She's like, I know you ain't gonna keep me locked up. My daughter's alive and my daughter's here. She's like, you are crazy. She's like, bitch, get the fuck up off me and we're gonna see my daughter. Don't know if that was the best move or not because we don't know what's going on. But Deirdre goes and gets in the elevator, Rowan's. So there's this whole kind of warble scene on the paint behind Aunt Carlotta when Deirdre decides to run away. So I immediately thought that maybe that's like Asher intervening and like doing something to fucking up Aunt Carlotta for, to not to interfere with the plans, right? Well, Rowan's in the elevator. Rowan's waiting for the elevator. Deirdre's coming up. The door opens. Rowan's like, oh, it's you. We kind of see a kind of smile. Then child, Deirdre's neck has been slit, right? So that's kind of how it ends, So let's kind of get into this episode a little bit, right? So the first thing is that there is a dramatic difference when you are writing and creating an original television show or original screenplay versus adapting something, right? So when you're creating your own piece, creating your own work, the sky's the limit, right? Like you have no limitations really as to what you could do, where your characters can say, whatever. Like there are, of course, there's structure and there's some great helpful hints, but you really are kind of have a blank canvas, right? When you are adapting a novel into a television show or screenplay, there are substantial limitations, right? So there are objective and subjective limitations. Your objective limitation is the fact that you are pretty much bound to mostly what's in the book, right? So the goal is to translate the book into a visual medium, because television and films are visual mediums. So the screenwriter has to come up with ways to visually translate these things that are written in a kind of narrative form to the visual element. And sometimes it can be very difficult. Like I've adapted 2 books, one into a film, one into a television show, and it can be a little tricky when you're trying to still keep some of the main element plot points into the piece that you're writing, but also make it visual, right? Like show, don't tell, right? So you don't have a whole bunch of exposition going in. With that being said, and having not read the source material, the script is not really translating that well, right? Because we're on our second episode and we still don't know how high the stakes are. So I was trying to think of what is missing and what they haven't done. What they have not done, and what they should have done in the first episode, and they definitely should have done by the second episode, is tell us whether Lasher, is really an antagonist or is he an ally, right? Because he really wasn't coming off antagonistic or, to Deirdre at all, right? Like they're partners. Or is he pretending to be an ally, but really has his own kind of, his own agenda, right? And it also did not tell us why is it so bad to keep Rowan from coming closer to Lasher and to finding out about her true heritage, right? What would happen if Rowan occurs? Somebody should have told us this when the show started, in the pilot, or definitely by the second episode. So I'll give you an example, right? Very famous example. For those of you who watched Avengers, right? In the first phase 1, right? At the end of the first Avengers movie, all we see is Thanos. We find out Thanos is on a rock somewhere outside of Earth. He has the gauntlet, and he now has found one Infinity Stone, right? So we're like, ooh, what happens? What's the Infinity Stone? What happens when the gauntlet comes out? And as the rest of the movies progress, or television shows progress, we see him collecting Infinity Stones and what would happen if he got them, right? We're not getting that in the Mayfair. We're not getting that in Mayfair Witches. We don't know what Lasher wants. We don't know what would happen if he gets what he wants. We don't know if Rowan, either would acquiesce to this or whatever, right? So that's just very difficult, and I don't know whether that's a screenwriting issue or a direction issue. And typically, if I don't know, it's a direction issue, right? Because at some point we have to be able to figure out what this is. Like the flashback in the first part of the show, in the beginning of the show, that did us nothing, right? Like, why do we care if birds are talking to one person? The birds didn't tell the first chick nothing. The birds didn't tell the second, didn't tell Rowan nothing because they were dead. We already figured out Rowan's a witch. Why do we need to see dead birds? And also, like, if you're going to give us a hand job scene, give us a good hand job scene, right? And I hate to, again, compare it to Interview with the Vampire, but, like, the sex scenes have just been very muted, and you could tell that there's an agenda not to overly sexualize women in this, which is fine, but you have to figure out a more creative way to do it because you already have a previous work in the first universe that kind of, like, sets the stage. So you don't have to be that have sex scenes or have sexualization the same as Interview with the Vampire, but it needs to be interesting and necessary. Why was the hand job necessary? If it was Lasher the witch was giving a hand job to, I was like, oh, okay, that totally makes sense. Who was the random guy? Why did she have to give him a hand job? He's like, don't make me wait. I'm not, it just didn't make sense. So we don't have high enough stakes. What was unclear, and I had to watch the kind of after the show because I decided to watch the after the show, which kind of really did upset me because the showrunner was talking about concepts and things that were not clear from watching the show. So how many of you thought that Rowan was upset and grieving because of the loss of her mother? Like, that's why she's drinking, and that's why she's crying, and that's why she's been all upset. The showrunner tells us at the end of the episode that she's really being upset because she killed the Dan Limley guy. That was not clear, right? Because what we see, we don't see her looking and reading the obituary of Dan Limley. We don't see her kind of like stalking his office or going to talk to his family or doing something that will let us know visually that she has some guilt about that previous action. We see her crying, we see her drinking, we see her taking these pills, and we see her hugging the urn. So that is not to say that these two things cannot be existing at the same time, that she could be grieving her mother and feeling guilty over the Dan Limley thing. But based upon the commentary from the showrunner, it seemed to be is that the Limley death was her primary reason for her kind of like coming unfrayed, and that was not really made clear while we were watching the show. So again, I think you have to give this episode kind of maybe like a C+. Again, it's the second episode. I have a rule for every show. Give it 3 episodes, right? By the 3rd episode, you should now kind of have a topography of kind of like where you think the show's going to go, where you think the characters are, who we want. Most shows by the 3rd episode, you're like, and we're at liftoff, right? Like we have liftoff. The only exception to that is Game of Thrones, right? Game of Thrones took about 4 or 5 episodes just because you had so many characters and it was just it took a lot of heft to move that world building around. So I do understand the difficulty in adapting the work, and the subjective, just to go back, the subjective restriction is that the author of the work may require approval from the scripts, right? Because most novelists sometimes don't like their work being adapted or don't feel that the adaptation of their work is a proper representation of what they really meant, right? So I recognize that they're working with some limitations, but there has to be a way, outside of using direct exposition, whether it's subtext, whether it's voiceovers or something to kind of give us, because we still don't really, how many of you really care about Rowan's journey, right? Like, she's just drunk and sad and slightly hoish, right? None of these things are all bad, but that's not enough to draw us in, right? We think of the Interview with the Vampire and we look at it, immediately we know where Louis' stakes are. Louis is going to end up fucking Lestat. Louis is going to end up being a vampire. How's this going to play out with his slow brother? How's this going to play out with his bougie black family? Like, we see the stakes, we see the kind of connectionness or whatever, and we don't see that with Rowan, right? So again, why do we care about Rowan's journey? And they really have not done that for us, and I'm really hoping they'll do it by the 3rd episode, because now she's going to be in the elevator with her dead mama, right? And then Aunt Carlotta's going to show up, and then Cripen's going to be there. So we're going to kind of, I know I'm calling him Cripen and Crispin. I'll get his pronunciation right by next week. But, so I'm hoping we're having some raised stakes, and we're going to really flush out, Lasher, like, is he an antagonist? Is he an ally? What is he? What are the real kind of motives? Why is everyone so like tiptoeing around him, right? Like, who exactly is he? And I hope, need to at least allude to something, at least by this episode, even if they don't tell us by until further in the season. So anyway, those are my thoughts. I hope you all liked it. Please like this video. Please subscribe. Please share. Hit your alerts. Drop down in the comments. Let me know. Again, I'm going to stick with it because I told you, I love this Immortal Universe concept. I love what AMC is doing. So I'm not going to bail on Mayfair Witches just because it's kind of bumpy, because there's some shows out there that kind of started off bumpy that ended up really good in the middle, in later seasons. Scandal is one of them, right? Scandal was like, nah. Like, if you will go back and watch Scandal, having watched the later seasons, hits different than if you started watching Scandal the first time it came out, and then you're like, okay, she's a side piece who's fucking the president. You know what I'm saying? Like, Scandal kind of started, it was a slow burn. So Mayfair Witches may end up being a slow burn as well, but there are just some technical aspects of it that need to be tighter, such that then we could be invested in it, right? Because this is too good of a show. My Prime dollars are going to too many things for this to be a bad show, and I do not want it to be canceled, because then it sends a really bad message, kind of symbolically, that a female-driven, female character antagonist show really can't do it on its own without a male main character, right? Because a lot of people are comparing this to Interview with the Vampire, and I don't think it necessarily should be a direct comparison. It can be an skewed comparison, right? Because Interview with the Vampire, again, if you haven't watched it, go back and watch it, because I caught my whole life, because it was that good. So I think, unfortunately, they maybe should have done Mayfair Witches first, then Interview with the Vampire, because I think the bar is so high with having Interview with the Vampire out that unless we see something happen in the next two episodes, it's not going to be able to reach that same high, and people will be disappointed. So if they do another series, or if there's another something that's going to come out, people are going to have very lowered expectations, and I think we should have really high expectations for this Immortal Universe, because it just sounds like a great concept, and I'm really excited to see what happens. So anyway, thank you. Like, subscribe, share, alert. Have a great weekend.